Arav, a digital native, scoured the internet's darkest corners. He was no stranger to the hidden layers of the web, where anonymity reigned and secrets were currency. His curiosity was insatiable, driving him deeper into the labyrinth of the digital underworld. He thrived on the thrill of the unknown, the adrenaline rush of uncovering hidden truths. Each click, each link was a step further into the abyss, a journey into the shadows where few dared to tread. The more he discovered, the more he wanted to know. One late evening, a cryptic message flashed across his screen. The silent stream. Watch your back. The words seemed to pulse with a life of their own, sending a chill down his spine. It was as if the message was meant specifically for him, a direct communication from the unknown.
Intrigued, Arav clicked the link. His heart pounded in his chest, a mix of fear and excitement coursing through his veins. What could this silent stream be? What secrets did it hold?
The video loaded, grainy and distorted. It was unlike anything he had seen before, a visual enigma that seemed to defy explanation. The screen flickered, and for a moment he thought he saw a face in the static, but it was gone, before he could be sure. A single static image flickered on the screen, a desolate, fog-choked forest. The trees stood like silent sentinels, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The fog swirled, creating an eerie, almost supernatural atmosphere. No sound, no movement, just an unsettling stillness. The silence was deafening, a void that seemed to swallow all sound. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Comments flooded the feed, each more disturbing than the last. They spoke of watchers, unseen eyes that followed your every move. Some claimed to have seen figures in the fog, shadowy shapes that disappeared when approached. It watches you back, one read. Don't let it in, warned another. The messages were a cacophony of paranoia and fear, each one adding to the growing sense of dread that gripped Arav. Arav felt a shiver crawl down his spine. The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper. He could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon him, a presence that was both intangible and undeniable. He dismissed it as the late hour, the eerie silence of his room amplifying the effect. But the feeling lingered, a gnawing unease that refused to be ignored. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was just his imagination. Yet a seed of unease had been planted. It took root in the back of his mind, growing with each passing moment. He couldn't help but glance over his shoulder, half expecting to see a shadowy figure standing there. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was watching him, its unseen gaze burning into his soul. The silent stream had left its mark, a haunting presence that would not be easily forgotten. Arav knew that he had crossed a line, ventured into a realm where the boundaries between reality and the digital world blurred, and there was no turning back.
"Don't do it, Arav," Nina warned, her voice laced with concern. "It's not worth the risk."
Arav had told her about the video, the unsettling comments, the growing unease that gnawed at him. Nina, ever the voice of reason, urged him to stay away. But Arav's curiosity had been piqued. He had to know the truth, had to unravel the mystery behind the silent stream.
"It's just a video, Nina. Don't worry," he said, trying to sound nonchalant.
He clicked play, the silence of the room broken by the faint hum of his laptop speakers. The image remained unchanged, the desolate forest shrouded in an unnatural stillness. But this time, something was different. Arav could feel it, a presence, watching, waiting. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and dread. Arav couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Shadows danced at the edge of his vision, disappearing when he turned to face them. Whispers seemed to emanate from the silence of his room, chilling him to the bone. His dreams were haunted by the forest from the video, the oppressive silence suffocating him. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, his heart pounding against his ribs like a trapped bird. He tried to tell himself it was just stress, that his imagination was running wild, but deep down, a primal fear whispered a terrifying truth. He had invited something into his life, something ancient and malevolent, and it wasn't going to leave so easily. Nina noticed the change in Arav. It wasn't just a fleeting moment of distraction or a temporary lapse in his usual demeanor. It was something deeper, more unsettling. She had known him for years, and his vibrant personality was now overshadowed by an inexplicable gloom. His usual exuberance was replaced by a haunted look, his eyes shadowed with fear. The spark that once lit up his face was now dimmed, replaced by a constant state of anxiety. It was as if he was carrying an invisible burden that weighed heavily on his soul.
Arav, what's going on with you? You seem so different. Nina's voice was filled with concern, her eyes searching his for answers. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong.
He was withdrawn, jumpy, constantly looking over his shoulder. Every little noise seemed to startle him, and he was always on edge, as if expecting something dreadful to happen at any moment. When she confronted him, he brushed it off as fatigue, but Nina knew better. She could see the fear in his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly when he thought no one was watching.
It's nothing, Nina. Just tired, that's all. Arav's voice was unconvincing, his attempt at a reassuring smile falling flat. The darkness in his eyes betrayed his words.
But one evening, as they were hanging out at Arav's place, the lights flickered. The sudden change in the atmosphere was palpable, sending a shiver down Nina's spine. The room plunged into darkness, the only light emanating from his laptop screen. Then, they heard it, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of the unknown, a noise that didn't belong in their world. Background voice, low, guttural growl. The growl was low and guttural, like static given a voice. It was a sound that seemed to seep from the laptop's speakers, filling the room with an eerie presence. A low, guttural growl, like static given a voice, seemed to seep from the laptop's speakers. Arav's blood ran cold. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew with chilling certainty that the sound originated from the silent stream. It was a stream he had stumbled upon late one night, a stream that seemed to broadcast nothing but static. But now it was clear that there was something more sinister at play. It had crossed over, breaching the barrier between the digital world and their reality, and it was hungry. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Whatever it was, it had found a way into their world, and it wasn't going to leave without taking something with it. The static symphony had begun, and there was no turning back. The growl escalated into a cacophony of digital screams, a symphony of chaos that seemed to reverberate through the very fabric of reality. It was as if the digital world had come alive, its cries echoing in a nightmarish chorus that sent shivers down Arav's spine. The laptop screen flickered violently, the static image of the forest replaced by a grotesque, distorted face. The serene landscape morphed into a scene of horror, the trees twisting into gnarled, claw-like shapes, and the sky darkening to an ominous shade of black. The face on the screen was a grotesque amalgamation of features, eyes bulging and mouth twisted into a sinister grin. Its eyes, two glowing orbs of malevolence, seemed to pierce through Arav's soul. They were not just looking at him, they were looking into him, as if searching for something deep within. The intensity of the gaze was unbearable, a burning sensation that made Arav feel exposed and vulnerable.
No, this can't be happening. Arav's voice trembled with fear and disbelief. He tried to convince himself that it was just a glitch, a trick of the light, but the terror in his heart told him otherwise. The digital nightmare was all too real.
He tried to turn away, to break free from its hypnotic gaze, but he couldn't move. His body felt like it was made of lead, every muscle frozen in place. The more he struggled, the tighter the invisible bond seemed to hold him. It was as if the screen had a magnetic pull, drawing him closer and closer. It was as if an invisible force held him captive. He could feel the pressure around him, like a pair of unseen hands gripping his shoulders and pinning him to the spot. The harder he fought, the stronger the force became, until he was completely immobilized. He felt a sharp pain in his head, a searing agony that threatened to split his skull open. It was as if his mind was being invaded, his thoughts being torn apart and rearranged by some malevolent entity. The pain was unbearable, a relentless assault on his senses that left him gasping for breath.
Arav, what's happening? Talk to me! Nina's voice was filled with panic and desperation. She shook him, trying to snap him out of his trance, but it was no use. Arav was trapped in a world of digital horror, unable to respond to her pleas.
Nina screamed, her voice lost in the digital maelstrom. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pulsating with a sinister energy. She could feel the presence of the entity, a dark force that seemed to feed on their fear and despair. She reached out to Arav, her hand passing through his arm as if he were a ghost. The sensation was chilling, a cold emptiness that sent a shiver down her spine. It was as if Arav was slipping away, his very essence being consumed by the digital entity. He was no longer entirely present, his mind slowly being consumed by the entity from the silent stream. His eyes were vacant, his expression blank, as if he were a puppet being controlled by unseen strings. The digital world had taken hold of him, and it was not letting go. It was taking over, twisting his thoughts, his fears, his very essence. Arav could feel his identity slipping away, replaced by the dark, malevolent presence that had invaded his mind. The digital screams grew louder, a cacophony of terror that drowned out his own thoughts. He was losing himself, becoming one with the digital nightmare.